Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm Ami Kassar, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, aka SBA Queen. And today I'm so excited to have my friend Crilley of the Jeff Crilley Show on. He's a fascinating entrepreneur who's been through some, I think, tremendous pivots and really interesting take in the PR world and now the podcasting world. I've watched it, been fascinated by it. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored, Lynn and Ami. It's a true honor to be on your show.
It's wonderful to meet you. So, Jeff, take us back. What did you do before the world of podcasting? Tell us your entrepreneurial story from the beginning.
All right. So I was a journalist for 25 years, starting in college when I was 19 years old. I broke into a small CBS station in Lansing, Michigan, while I was still a college student, and worked my way up from intern to part-time reporter to full-time reporter to weekend anchor by the time I graduated. I went from Lansing to Omaha to 4 freezing years in Minneapolis, and then I came to the sunny state of Texas in 1992, and I was happy doing TV news for another 16 years in Dallas for a total of 25 years of TV news experience. I wrote a book in 2002 that changed everything. The book was about public relations. It basically was called Free Publicity, a TV Reporter Shares the Secrets for Getting Covered on the News. It's a tell-all book. It says to anybody who wants to get on the news, no, this is what you say to a journalist. This is what you never say to a journalist. Here's how you talk in sound bites. Here's how you become an expert in your field. I ended up running around giving 300 speeches a year for 6 straight years in addition to my TV job. And I sold 70,000 copies of this little $10 book. That's when this business was born, because when you're, out there promoting yourself as the leading expert on publicity, people keep trying to hire you. And so people would say, hey, Jeff, I'll buy your little $10 book. To be honest, I'm not much of a reader. How about I just hire you right now? Because my current PR firm is horrible. And so I kept turning away the money. At the ripe old age of 45, I said, you know what? I think I'll take the money. So I reinvented myself. I walked away from a 25-year news career, Emmy Awards, freed an innocent man from prison, did some really cool things. And it was the scariest thing I ever did, walking away from the comfort of a cushy TV job in the 4th largest TV market into the wild world of entrepreneurship. And as you both know, it's the difference between a lion in the jungle and a lion in the zoo. A lion in the zoo is well fed. Every morning at 10 and every afternoon at 2, they get a juicy steak. An entrepreneur has to learn how to hunt. So I never had a bad year. As soon as I opened my doors in 2008 in my home, I had 10 clients paying me $3,000 a month. Not too shabby. Second year, 20 clients paying me $3,000 a month. That's $750,000 with no overhead. Now I wake up, big bills, 20 full-time employees. Those are W-2s, 401k plans. We cater lunch daily. I hate the first of the month because that's when $52,000 rent comes due every single month. And I don't say that to impress you guys, but most PR firms never get this large. They don't get this large because either they don't know what they're doing and they get fired because they never actually got their client on the news, or they're incredibly stingy. And what I mean by that is, okay, Ami, we just got you on, Good Morning America, pay your bill, and we'll see you next month. So they just slowly kind of dole it out. And I took the opposite approach. I said, I'm Willy Wonka. I make chocolate. I'll just rain the publicity down on the client, because if I make them famous, their friends are going to wonder how they got on the news. So, and for a while, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, Ami was a client and got to experience some of that. I can't tell you how many times you did morning radio at 6 in the morning. Am I right, Ami? So it's a brutal wake up call, but Ami's my ideal client. I love experts. Anybody that I can slap the label expert on is my client. And Ami knows this because I think you're on my mailing list. Every single morning for 16 years, I've dedicated myself to waking up at 4 in the morning. I write a daily email that goes out to 29,000 journalists with an open rate of 35%. And I've not missed a single day in 16 years, not Christmas Day, not New Year's Day, for 16 years. So I gave you a lot. You said, tell me about your career. And that was the Reader's Digest version.
Wow.
Let's start with the PR stuff, because I find it fascinating, Jeff, because I've worked with a lot of PR firms over the years. I think that your model of PR is completely different than how 99% of the firms do it. So let's talk about what you do and how it's different and how you got there.
Sure. So when I was a newsman, I was getting calls all the time from PR firms. So in every industry, there's a buyer and there's a seller, right? There's a congressman and there's a lobbyist. There's a doctor and a drug rep. And most of the time, the people speak the same language. But I noticed that in journalism, PR people did not speak journalism. They were messing up the pitch. As I was there as their customer, they're trying to persuade me to do a story on their client, and they're messing up the pitch. And so when I quit TV news, I said, let me come up with a PR firm that the journalist would love and the client would love. What would that look like? And so I took a blank sheet of paper and I split it into, and I said, for the journalist to love me, I actually have to give them real news. Thus the name of my company. It's called Real News Public Relations. So for the journalist to love me, I can't pitch them BS. And that's one of the things that really annoys journalists is when you pick up the phone and you're selling them a commercial, they feel like saying, why don't you call our sales department? So when the client comes up with a bad idea, I actually need to tell the client, bad idea. That dog won't hunt. So I told you I had split my paper in two. The journalist will love me if I give them real news. The client will love me if I actually deliver on the promise and I get them on the news. We're averaging between 15 and 30 media placements per month per client, which is just an insane level of service. And the reason we're able to do that is because of the trust that I've built over 16 years of putting out this daily tip sheet. It's a very long tip sheet that really takes me 3 full hours to put together. And so journalists that were reading me when they were in Waco, Texas, a small market, they got good and they moved to Dallas, fourth largest TV market. And then I added their name to my list again. And then the next thing you know, they're at the Today Show. So we have journalists on my list who don't remember life before this really nice guy named Jeff Crilley came into their inbox and started sending them tips. And so the idea behind the newsletter is, let me make it easy for you, the journalist. I'm going to give you the expert that you need to talk to. You don't need to call Jeff Crilley or his PR firm. Just call Ami. Here's his cell phone, here's his email, and here's his picture. And so the ease of access is what makes our company so successful. What most PR firms, I think, fail to realize when they send out a press release, even if the press release was good, the journalist is doing math. They're thinking, man, I'm going to have to call this PR firm that may or may not call me back. And then they're going to call the client who may or may not call them back. This whole thing could take 6 hours. I got to be live at noon today. So by stepping out of the way and introducing the client to the media and then saying to the client, hey, if you get requests, we need to know about them. Why don't you send them to our capture team so we can capture you on the news? And so it's a completely different model. The model of public relations in America is broken. It's based on a press release. And the truth is, journalists really don't read press releases. They get far too many to read. So in my former TV station, they now get 4,000 a day. And it all comes by email. And so imagine, Lynn, if you had to read 4,000 press releases a day, you'd come up with a shorthand. And the shorthand that they all came up with is they look at their screen of 25 press releases, most of them largely too promotional to ever be viable on the news. They look at their screen of 25 press releases. And I don't know if you discovered this button. There's a button beneath all those emails that says delete all. Have you seen that? They delete all. They're not randomly deleting all. They're looking, did the Dallas Police Department send me anything? Did the Fort Worth Police Department send me anything? Because that could be a crime that they want to cover. So they're just delete all, delete all, delete all. And then the PR firm puts a young lady named Brandy with an I, with a heart over the I, on the phone with the assignment manager saying, hey, this is Brandy with, XYZ PR firm. We just sent you a press release. Did you get it? To be honest, the person answering the phone has no idea whether they got your press release. They just deleted 500 while they were talking to you. So they say, listen, if you send it to that email address, yes, we've got it. We'll look at it. And if anybody is interested, we'll get back in touch with you, which is really just blowing them off. And so then Brandy goes to her boss and says, I sent it out to 10,000 news organizations. I followed up with 15 journalists in Dallas and they all have it. And then the boss says, good. And then the client is waiting at the news conference for the media to show up. And nobody shows up. And they look at the PR firm saying, where is all the media? And they say, well, that was the day that Trump did blah, blah, blah. which is every day. So they always have an excuse as to why they weren't successful. And I looked at that model. I said, that model is just so incredibly broken. I need to be a disruptor in this industry. The pursuit of public relations is a noble profession, but it has to be practiced with excellence. Just as you guys are passionate about what you do for your clients, I'm equally as passionate about what I do for my clients. In fact, I'll tell clients on the phone, I will not take you as a client if I see a possibility of disappointing you, because I'm a pleaser. There's 5 love languages. I'm addicted to praise. And as a praise junkie, I need my fix. And if I think it would end with the weight of a disappointment, I never take the client.
Jeff, let me maybe dig in a little bit and I think it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but is it fair to say that most PR firms offer big hits like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or a spot on CNN or NPR or something like that? And your game is more lots of small hits. Is that fair?
I think, okay, so and when you say the big firms, I would say there are New York PR firms that have really close relationships with Good Morning America and those Wall Street Journal reporters. You're going to pay about $10,000 per month. And that's what you're paying for, is that they went to a wedding with a close producer at the Today Show or something like that, and you're really buying their friendship. But here in Dallas, I've yet to meet a PR firm that guarantees anything. They promise a lot. They say, "Hey, we have all these contacts and we'll get you on the news." But we get refugees, Ami, from other PR firms that are it's like Bugs Bunny steam coming out of their ears. They're mad because nothing happened at all. They got no hits at all. I run into people who say, "Man, I wish I had met you $100,000 ago." And typically you know whether you signed a bad PR deal within the first few weeks. My record is, in case you're interested, 100 media placements in 30 days. And it was for a member of EO, which Ami and I are near and dear to our heart. I'll tell you that story very quickly. A guy from EO Fort Worth calls me and he says, "Jeff, you don't know me, but you did PR for one of my forum mates a little while ago, and I hear you're pretty good at PR." I said, "I am good at PR." He says, "All right, well, I might need to hire you." And I should preface this by saying he called me in mid-November during the height of COVID. So mid-November 2020. He says, "Jeff, those Santas in the mall, the Rent-A-Santas?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "So I have this company called HireSanta.com, and we have a Santa shortage." And he called me at 6:30 at night. And I almost froze. I said, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing tomorrow?" He says, "What do you want me to be doing tomorrow?" I said, "You're going to do about 20 interviews tomorrow." He says, "At 6:30 at night, how are you going to get me 20 interviews tomorrow?" He says, I explained I have this daily email, and I explained the power of what he was pitching. The feeding frenzy surrounding the labor shortage was at an all-time high. Remember, we couldn't get somebody to work at Wendy's back in 2020. That meets the feeding frenzy around Santa season in mid-November. And so I said to him, I said, "Listen, I'm gonna send you a proposal. Think about it, pray about it. You could sign it. You don't have to pay right away, but if you sign it, I know you're serious." So I get to bed early because I wake up at 4. So I went to bed, woke up the next morning, and in the inbox was signed and paid. I said, "Okay, game on. I hope he's ready for the chaos that's about to happen." So I wrote the headline that said, "The labor shortage extends all the way to the North Pole." Now, I had promised him, I normally promise 15 to 30. I doubled down with him because I knew this story was so juicy. I said, I'm going to personally guarantee you 60 media placements in 30 days. And I underestimated myself because I got him 100 media placements in 30 days. And that included all of the big ones, Ami, the Today Show, MSNBC, USA Today. I mean, it was every single media outlet. And I pride myself on saying I actually didn't have to make a single phone call. I got him 100 media placements in 30 days without making a single phone call to a single journalist. They just trust me. So in answer to you, that's a long-winded answer to your question, Ami, but yes, there are PR firms that are really good in New York that can guarantee, the Today Show, or at least, I will be having a meaningful conversation with a producer at the Today Show. I will get you into the editorial meeting where they're going to make that decision. And we specialize in more, Dallas Morning News, Fort Worth Star Telegram, local news stations. For many of our clients, and I like to onboard clients that I can make happy. For many of my clients, getting on the air at the NBC in Denver, to them is as big a deal as Good Morning America. They just want to have on their social media feed. They want their social media feed on LinkedIn to be filled with every day, every 2 days. Here I am again. Now I'm in Pittsburgh. Now I'm in Las Vegas. And the volume is what makes my clients happy.
Question. You mentioned that you wrote a book and you gave all the what you should say, what you shouldn't say. And I forget when you said you wrote it, but is that still completely relevant today?
Well, I'll send you guys a digital copy and you can send them to any of your listeners, or if
Good.
anybody on this call wants to reach out.
It's interesting. I'm listening to your story, Jeff, and I'm putting my PR hat on now because in our industry, well, there's a lot of you know, hyperbole around what's going on with the new administration in the SBA world, but no one really knows yet because there's a lot of these initiatives that are announced don't have sort of meat to the bones yet, per se. The one thing that they did was they said it used to be that to get an SBA loan, and Lynn's the expert, she can correct me if I'm wrong, you had to be 51% owned by U.S. citizens or green card holders. Is that correct?
Permanent residents, correct.
Or permanent residents. They changed that rule now to say that, and it's law, that even if there cannot be any shareholders of the company that are foreigners.
Wow.
To get an SBA loan.
That's a news story.
It's a news story, but I just heard last night from, I don't know if she's EO or YPO, I'm not going to say her name, but she's in the middle of closing a big building for an expansion of her business. And she has 2 investors in the project who are foreigners, and that loan is done.
Wow.
So that's the first real lie. I don't know if she'd be willing to share that story publicly or whatever, but that's the first live story I've heard, Lynn, at least, of someone being directly impacted.
Wow. That's a good story. And Ami, just for free, I would put you out in my daily email on that one. Because that's
I mean, you're telling me that the loan number was not issued before that regulation, correct?
I don't think loan numbers have been issued yet, especially because it's a 504. I don't think the loan numbers, they're done. It's interesting. Anyway, it's just a side note, Jeff. I was just like thinking out loud about that. But let's go back because I love your innovation in the PR industry, but it doesn't end there. Let's talk about the last couple of years of your life, because in case you were bored, you mixed it up again. What inspired you? You're running the successful PR firm, new model, innovation, and then you add this whole thing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my daughter actually came up with the idea 6 years ago, and when she first said, "Hey, Daddy, we need to get into podcasting," I laughed at her and I said, "Who listens to podcasts?" She said, "My generation does, Dad. All those kids on the Katy Trail. It's not music. You got to trust me." So, in a moment of grace, I threw her my credit card. I said, "Don't go nuts." She spent about $2,000 on little GoPros and a little board, nothing fancy. In the first month, she had, I think, 10 clients in her little division. The next month, it was 20 clients in her little division. I was like, man, podcasting is a thing. What happens if I spend a little bit of money? So over the course of the last 6 years, I spent $2 million. And now this is the future. Politics aside, there are a lot of people who believe that Joe Rogan got Trump elected in those swing states. He did. Barron Trump, Trump's son, said, "Dad, forget 60 Minutes. They only get about 13 million viewers on a good Sunday. Joe Rogan can easily get 100 million people listening to his show, especially with somebody like you." And so he did a 3-hour show with Joe Rogan, followed by JD Vance doing a 2-hour show with Joe Rogan. And a lot of people believe that that was the tipping point in those swing states. And what that did for me and my business, we're off to our best year ever in terms of people saying, let's go on podcast. podcasting. I think people are coming to recognize that the future is not begging Fox and CNN, tell our story, please. The future is tell your own story, but just do it in a professional setting. I mean, you guys are both well lit. You have a beautiful podcast. We're catering to those people who don't want to edit. What every entrepreneur who starts a podcast hates is when the guest after the show says, man, I shouldn't have said that about my ex-wife. Can you edit that out? Well, who edits that out? Like who on the team is going to edit that out? We have very, prominent people who they're lawyers. They're charging $500 an hour during the day, but they're spending till 11:30 at night editing. I just tell them, no. Just come in, be the TV star, sit down, interview people, leave. We'll do all the editing, uploading, and tagging after the show. So I feel like just as we're reinventing how public relations is practiced, I think we're reinventing how podcasting is done. It needs to go from a do-it-yourself at-home product to a more commercial ease, just walk in, sit down and talk. The gentleman that I just showed you, the veteran, he was doing it from his home and he had a nice little setup at home, but I asked him the same question. I said, who does the editing when somebody says, I need you to cut that out? He says, well, that's tough because I don't really edit. We have to kind of do a reshoot. And I said, well, that's not ideal. And so I said, why don't you come in here? And I think it elevates your show to the next level. And what I love about our podcasters is it becomes part of their identity. People who will come on my show for the first time and I'll suggest to them, you were great on my show. You should have a show yourself. At first, they're like, me, a show? What would I do with a show? And then within a month or so after they start hosting a show, it's there on their business card. It's like, I'm a national television show host and don't you know me? Anyway.
So what's next for you, Jeff? Well, first of all, how do you balance the two? You've got this PR firm and now you got the podcast studio. How do you balance the two?
So most of the money that we make at this company comes in through public relations. I honestly think I may break even on the podcast because my overhead is so high. So we use the podcast to get people up here. It's very glamorous. And then once they're up here, I want to like, hey, you have such a great show. Would you ever want to be on the news? And then what I'll do is I'll put them in my daily email for free. No strings attached. I always like to just, try it before you buy it. I can always tell a good client from a bad client after a little free sample. Some are just overwhelmed and say, hey, have your son send me the paperwork. Let's get started. And others are like, well, it's not really my cup of tea. And I'd rather find that out ahead of time than to start an engagement with them and then later disappoint them.
I did have one question. Do you specialize in any industries or you're agnostic to whatever anybody wants to?
I'm agnostic on both the PR side and the podcast side. I'm agnostic to the point that I can say, let me allow you to be an expert in something. So one of our recent clients came in, he created it's an AI company. It's called Easy Locator, and he caters to golf clubs. I didn't know this before I met the man, but apparently there's a science to placing the hole. You move the hole every day at high-end golf courses because otherwise you would wear out the grass when they're walking onto the green. So they move the hole every day. And apparently this Easy Locator company allows the maintenance people to place the hole in the right place the next day. When I looked at him, I said, okay, there's a finite amount of interest in you if we keep you in this narrow box of you're an expert on golf courses. I said, what if I made you an expert on AI? He says, I'm okay with that. I've spent 40 years in technology and I've been around AI my entire adult life. I said, okay, that's it. You're an AI expert. And then we coach him on, every day there's stories about, is AI going to take my job? Workers aren't adopting it. And so then we put him out there in my daily email as an AI expert. And then we teach him how to pivot. During the interview, he can say, that's one of the reasons why I started my company Easy Locator, because golf clubs actually need help running their big companies.
Interesting.
Cool. Jeff, do you have more than one studio?
So we have 6 on this floor, 1 in Fort Worth, 1 in South Lake, and 1 in Austin. And we're kind of looking at Houston as our next logical place to open up. And you asked me, like, what's next for me? I imagine one of these in every major city. Every major city needs a studio like this. The only thing that's kept me from really ramping up is my obsession with wanting people to love me. So it would bother me if I had this great thing going on in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin, but my Pittsburgh location is horrible. I'm getting all these complaints about my Pittsburgh location. So I keep kind of saying to myself, don't open up just for the sake of opening up. There's a lot of fast food chains that have gone bankrupt here in the last couple of years because they rolled out too many locations, and a third of their locations weren't making money. So I'm not on an ego trip where I need to have my sign in every major city. But I want to get there. If I could do it and guarantee the customer experience is excellent, I would do it. I know, I think you and I have talked about franchising in the past, and the only thing that, I hear some horror stories of franchisees that don't get along with the franchise owner, and all that drama doesn't sound fun to me.
There's a guy, I think we talked about him in our EO chapter, who has a lot of expertise in building out franchise networks. He might be interesting to get his perspectives. I'll introduce. He's in Australia right now.
Competition in studios? I mean, I know people who have studios in Philadelphia or in the area where Ami and I could go and do our podcast if we chose to. But that's why I'm wondering, don't you have competition?
There are a couple of locations here in Dallas that have the nice lighting that we have, but they only have one studio, so all their shows look like.
I see.
And I think what we're also set up for is doing multiple shows at the same time. So you wouldn't even believe how much the fiber costs, because we have to have fiber running so that all 6 studios here in Dallas could be streaming live at the same time. So yeah, that's I hope
My
that
husband sells fiber.
Really? Okay, good.
I do have an idea.
So anyway, our fiber cost is high.
Jeff, I have to just hats off to you. There aren't many people in our ecosystem who are really disruptors. And I consider you to be a disruptor. I think you have a model that has disrupted the PR business. And whenever anyone asks me for a PR referral, I always go to you.
Thank you. You've been very generous, and anytime I get an email from Ami introducing me to somebody, I'm on it.
That's great.
And I also think your podcast studio model is disruptive. I don't think you're charging enough, but that's a separate conversation.
I might have to take this little clip and put it on my homepage.
I think your price is too low. Just my hunch. But where do people find you, Jeff?
So we have 2 websites. On the PR side, it's realnewspr.com, and on the podcast side, it's launchashow.com.
I love it. So
great.
Jeff, thank you so much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. It was truly an honor to be on your show, Lynn. Ami,
it was great to meet you. Very interesting story. Thanks, Jeff.
Right. Appreciate you so much.